Hotep, everybody. This is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. It is Saturday, June 1st, 2024, and we are live, and I wanted to come on for a few minutes and invite you to join me at our online school for our multi-week online history course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We have another class session that we have starting today in a few minutes. And we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. And we deal with thousands of years of history. And we look at chronologically what leads to the transatlantic slave trade taking place and what's the impact of it. Okay, there are 15 different books that we reference, 200 slides, over 200 slides that I put together. Some of the things we look at are the impact of Juneteenth and how a lot of Americans don't understand Juneteenth and the significance of it, but also the fact that slavery didn't end on June 19th, 1865. And I've done extensive presentations on that. I'll be speaking at some Juneteenth presentations here in the Detroit area. We talk about ancient Africa and who Imhotep was. We deal with things like the 1619 Project and what the 1619 Project gets wrong about the African presence in America, because Africans were here in the land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. These were the Khoisan, and we did not first come to this country conquered and shackled in chains, conquered by Europeans. That's misinformation. Yes, 1619 did happen, but before 1619, there was 1526 in the South Carolina, Georgia area, and that was an attempt by the Spanish to set up a settlement. That attempt failed, but there were about 100 Africans that were taken into that area, and we're going to overthrow our oppressors. Okay, now this is 93 years before 1619, Jamestown, Virginia. But this is not talked about a lot, okay? But there's a good article from the Washington Post. Before 1619, there was 1526, the mystery of the first enslaved Africans and what became the United States. But even before this, even though this history right here is important, okay? Don't get me wrong, but even before that, there were African people that were here. So I talk about Dr. David Imhotep and the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, in the class. And this book is significant because it deals with the African presence going back at least 51,700 years. And these were the Khoisan, who come from Southern Africa, and they go all around the world. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world. They were here in the land that we call the United States of America as well. Now, I've interviewed Dr. David Imhotep a number of times on the African History Network show before he passed away. He became an ancestor in late 2023. But his book is phenomenal, and his subsequent book, The First Americans Were Africans, Revised and Expanded. Okay, that's the second book. But if we look at this here, he talks about the discovery by Dr. Albert Goodyear made in 2003, I think it was 2003, in Allendale County, South Carolina. Okay. And Dr. Albert Goodyear and his team discovered 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M17D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. His book is backed up by 713 footnotes, as well as, it was 2004, 713 footnotes, as well as 7 peer-reviewed articles as well. Now, a lot of people try to invalidate this evidence and this research because they want to operate based upon the Clovis culture theory, and that the first humans that came to this land that we call the United States of America were Native Americans, and it's the Clovis culture discovery in New Mexico. And that dates back somewhere around 15,000 years ago. Okay, somewhere around 13,000, 14,000 BC or so. Okay, but this discovery blows that out the water, and these would have been African people. Now, when I interviewed Professor Manu and Pim, March 31st, 2024, we got into this discussion of this African presence prior to the Clovis culture. And he was talking about archaeological discoveries, and some of them I was familiar with. And I brought this one up. And we also talked about the one in Brazil that pushes the date of Homo sapiens in Brazil, in South America, back at least 100,000 years ago. Okay. So the deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets, the more research they do, the older we get. So before we can start talking about the transatlantic slave trade, you know, to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence, right? And we have to go back thousands of years. We have to deal with the Khoisan. We have to deal with the Nile Valley region of Africa and African people going up the Nile River. Kemet benefited, ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt benefited from the history of Nubia or Ta-Nehisi, which is the mother of ancient Kemet, as well as Abyssinia or Ethiopia, which is the grandmother. Africans migrate from the Nile Valley region into Central Africa, into West Africa. And when we look at the discovery from June 2017 coming out of Morocco, we see that Africans they found remains of Homo sapiens dating back between 300,000 to 350,000 years ago, which is at least 100,000 years prior to the earliest known remains that they had, which they found in Ethiopia about 1974, which date back 195,000 years ago. So as more archaeological discoveries come out, what they're finding is that all of this is much older than they originally thought. And Africans were migrating out of the Nile Valley region of Africa much earlier than they thought as well. Okay, so one of the things that we look at in the class are archaeological discoveries, so we can properly frame this conversation. Okay, you can't start the history with African people already in slavery, shackled in chains, being dehumanized, being raped and things like this. You can't start there. We have to go back, and we're dealing with a history before Europeans even come into existence. We're dealing with a history before Europeans even come into existence. Now, these are two Khoisan sisters right here. And you can, this excerpt comes from, deals with a study from Science, that was published in Science magazine, October 2012. It was a genetic study that found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 100,000 years ago. Now, this is before Europeans come into existence, before Native Americans come into existence. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population had separated so early from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. Okay, now you can, if you like this type of information, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for this full online course, and it's 10 multi-week sessions. Okay, and we have a few more sessions left. Now, we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. So our next sessions are today, June 1st. We're going to start up in a few minutes as soon as I finish this broadcast. So you can join us at our online school. This is taught at our online school, the African History Network online school, June 8th and June 22nd, 2024. All right. And here's the flyer as well. The classes are on sale, $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. As soon as you register for this course, you can go back to class number 1. You can watch all the class sessions. They're archived. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. I show you excerpts of interviews I've done with many of our scholars as well, like Professor James Small and Tony Browder and Runoko Rashidi, etc. You can look at our class lesson plan here as well. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2007. I've been studying history 34 years. I put together an extensive class lesson plan that takes you through each class session to show you an outline of the type of content that we cover. You can download the class lesson plan as well to help you in your studies, help you in your research also. Okay. We have a preview of the class here as well. And then my second class that starts up. Now we got information for my my online show, my radio show, the African History Network show as well. Facebook, YouTube, download the iHeartRadio app. You can listen to podcasts also. But my new class starts up class number 1 starts up Sunday, June 23rd, Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Now, this is a fantastic class, and this class actually helps us to understand what is taking place right now in America with the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, with the attack on critical race theory, with the attack on voting rights, anti-Black laws being passed, all of this. This class right here, and I developed this class. I first started teaching this in late 2021. And I created this class because what I realized was the first class that I taught, I had so much information to cover. I did not have a chance to really dig in deep into this period of history from 1800 to 1968 to understand what leads to the U.S. Civil War taking place. What happens during the Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1877. We look at policies like the Missouri Compromise of 1820. We look at the Haitian Revolution, okay, 1791 to 1804, and we start with the Haitian Revolution and the Louisiana Purchase of 1803 because those two events are connected. Okay, the Louisiana Purchase, one of the reasons why it took place was because of the Haitian Revolution and Napoleon Bonaparte and the French getting their behinds kicked by the Haitians. Okay, so we take you through our history and look at this history chronologically. All right, so we look at the Missouri Compromise. We go look at the Mexican-American War, 1846, 1848. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848, which is how the U.S. gets California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. Okay, this is how they get all of this territory. And we see what leads to the U.S. Civil War taking place. South Carolina is the first state to secede from the Union, December 20th, 1860, 6 weeks after Abraham Lincoln becomes president-elect. And you have them, the South thinking that Lincoln is going to free the slaves. So we look at the U.S. Civil War. We look at the Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877. And African Americans get voting rights. You have the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitutions. And then we see with the Compromise of 1877, we're going to see a lot of those rights reversed. And we see an attack on voting rights today, continuing the attack on voting rights and rights that African Americans were given that took place during the Reconstruction era. We see that we can draw a straight line from the January 6, 2021 insurrection that took place, not just because of the election of Biden-Harris and the big lie being pushed. That's part of it, but also January 5th, 2020, January 5th, 2021, the day before the January 6th election, you had the special Senate election in Georgia, a former Confederate state, where Senator Raphael Warnock, the African-American man, won his reelection to the U.S. Senate. And you had Senator John Ossoff, who's a Jewish man. He won, and a Democrat, he won his senatorial election. And this gave Democrats control of the Senate, a slim majority in the Senate, with Vice President Kamala Harris being a tie-breaking vote. All right. So you had Donald Trump, who was saying that African Americans, he was saying that people were cheating in Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Atlanta, Georgia. And these are cities that have high African American populations. I live 4 minutes away from what was known as the TCF Center, which is where they were doing the vote count in downtown Detroit. Okay, I saw what was I saw the protests going on outside, and how you had these Trump supporters out there. Okay, you can draw a direct line from the collapse of Reconstruction and the political violence that helped bring an end to Reconstruction and what's taking place right now. Okay, so we deal with this in these two classes. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for these classes right now. You can join us in class today, because we have a few class sessions left of my main class that I teach, called Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, so it's on sale, $60, regularly $130. Like I said, we do the click right here to register here. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. The content is PG-13, so you can use this content with your children also. It's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. All right. And you can download our class lesson plan, which will help you in your research. Okay, so we take you through our history. We look at different archaeological discoveries, like on the Greek island of Crete, they found stone tools that date back 130,000 years ago. This was in 2010. This is an article from the New York Times. We look at things like Tanis Heraklion, the lost city of Egypt, which is about 1,200 years old, and it was believed to have been built around 8th century BC. We look at things like look at cooperative economics, which comes out of African culture, comes out of African history. And we look at information from Dr. Jessica Gordon Nemhard, who wrote the book Collective Courage, that talks about the history of economic empowerment and us using the cooperatives, even going back to slavery, like the Free African Society in 1787, the Free African Union in 1780, things like the Colored Merchants Association in 1928. We have a deep, rich history of cooperative economics, okay, and economic empowerment. And these are principles that we brought with us from Africa, okay. And then we will go and continue to look at archaeological discoveries like this one here. This is the one I mentioned, dealing with Morocco. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. Now, this is a good article from NBCnews.com that talks about Homo sapiens, remains of Homo sapiens being found in Morocco that date back 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. Okay, so we'll take you through different archaeological discoveries. Then we'll look at ancient civilizations. Whether we talk about ancient Kemet, whether we talk about Nubia or Ta-Nehisi. We'll look at, we'll talk about the Olmec civilization as well. And Dr. David Imhotep talks about the Olmecs in the First Americans were Africans documented evidence. And he talks about the ancient Egyptian Mandinka Olmec connection. And he deals with how the Olmecs were a mixture of these three. It was an intermixing of these three that give you the Olmecs. Okay. We'll talk about the Freemasonry in Egypt of the West and how ancient Africa influences the United States. How the layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon an ancient African is based upon the layout of ancient Egypt. Number one, how the Washington Monument is a ancient African symbol called a Tekken, or Tekkenu for plural, which comes from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. And you see there were about 1,200 Tekkenu in ancient Kemet. Today, they're less than 12. They've been taken to other parts of the world as well, some of them like London, England, New York City, and Paris, France. There's a good article from face-to-faceafrica.com called Cleopatra's Needle, how 3 ancient Egyptian obelisks ended up in New York City, London, and Paris. Okay, face-to-faceafrica.com. And this deals with Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. When you look at the Black Madonna and Child, okay, the Black Madonna and Child comes from that story of the trilogy, okay, ancient Asar, Aset, and Heru. And we see our stories told over and over again over thousands of years, adapted to various people's cultures. All right. When we look at Freemasonry, we see the teachings from the ancient Egyptian mystery system or ancient Kemetic mystery system that are going to be taken into Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. And then those teachings are going to go underground after the Knights Templar are disbanded. And then they're going to resurface as the Yorkshire Rites of the Freemasons and other groups of Freemasons. And we know that 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. So, and we know George Washington was a Freemason as well. The word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. The term child of light or sons and daughters of light was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. Now, if you read Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder, pages 18 and 32, this is one of the books we use in the class. He deals with this, okay? And we show you don't have to buy any of the books if you don't want to. We show you excerpts of the books on the screen. But we look at information like this, take you throughout history, and we see the influence on America from ancient Africa, all right? We look at things like why is Christmas celebrated on December 25th and how that's related to the winter solstice, how that's all dealing with astronomy, okay? And then we'll go through and one of the things we look at is the movie, the African influence in the movie Black Panther, which is a deep movie on multiple levels. I've done extensive research on the film Black Panther, okay? And the language spoken in the film Black Panther is isiXhosa, which is a Bantu language. Wakanda is a real word. Wakanda comes from the Sioux Indian language and Omaha Ponca language, and means possesses secret powers, but it's also an Osage word as well. We know is also Kikongo also, because we know Kanda means family in Kikongo. So it's a Kikongo word as well, which is a Bantu language. We know in Wisconsin, there is a Wakanda water park that's been there for decades. I went and did extensive research to prepare to be able to do my presentations on the film Black Panther. Okay. So the film Black Panther is deep on multiple levels. But we'll go through and look at civilizations like Carthage, in Northern Africa, in where Tunisia is, and we'll talk about Hannibal Barca and the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, fighting against the Romans, and then we'll look at the history, some of the history of the Moors, and the Moors going into Europe in 711 AD, settling in the lower Spain, or what was called the Iberian Peninsula then, and the Moors referred to it as Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus, which basically means to walk in the spiritual path or walk in the spiritual light. One of the books that we look at in the class and cite excerpts from is Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivy Van Sertima, which is one of the best books dealing with the history of the Moors. Okay, so we'll go through and look at this history and talk about people like General Tariq ibn Ziyad, who invades the Iberian Peninsula 711 AD. And this is when the Moors go in. They do a reconnaissance mission in 710 AD. They go in 711 AD, and they're fighting against the Vandals and the Visigoths. Okay, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is on the Greek island of the French island of Corsica, and these Italian island of Sardinia, they have African Moors heads on their national flags because the Moors were in those areas. They were defeated, but it took a monumental effort to defeat them. Okay. And this is why those African Moors heads are on those flags. We'll talk about people like Mansa Musa, and we'll deal with the three great African civilizations, Ghana, Songhai, and Mali. Mansa Musa was the richest man in the world, who also is similar to T'Challa, who's the richest, T'Challa, the Black Panther, who's the richest man in the Marvel comic universe. There was a good article from history.com, the official website of the History Channel, called "This 14th Century African Emperor Remains the Richest Person in History." This is from March 19th, 2018, the month after the film Black Panther came out. And this is Europeans admitting this history. Okay, they say in the vast fictional universe of Marvel Comics, T'Challa, better known as Black Panther, is not only king of Wakanda, he's also the richest superhero of them all. And although today's fight for the title of wealthiest person alive involves a tug of war between billionaire CEOs, the wealthiest person in history, Mansa Musa, has more in common with Marvel's first black superhero. Mansa Musa became ruler of the Mali Empire in 1312 AD, taking the throne after his predecessor Abubakar II, for whom he'd served as deputy, went missing on a voyage he took by sea to find the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. Mansa Musa's rule came at a time. Now, this is so important right here, what they're saying, this paragraph. Mansa Musa's rule came at a time when European nations were struggling due to ravaging civil wars and a lack of resources, because they're dealing with that. But then in 1347 AD, the Black Death, the bubonic plague, hits Europe. We just talked about that last class. And from 1347 to 1400, Europe loses between 1/4 to 1/3 of their population. Okay, the Black Death, the bubonic plague, Europe loses somewhere between 25 million to 75 million people. Mansa Musa's rule came at a time when European nations were struggling due to raging civil wars and a lack of resources. During that period, the Mali Empire flourished thanks to ample natural resources like gold and salt. Okay, so we're going to see how the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors are going to lead to Cristoforo Colombo setting sail August 3rd, 1492, late in the same year that the African Moors lose control of Granada, January 2nd, 1492, their last Spanish stronghold. Okay, and it's going to be August 2nd, 1492, that the Spain expels the Sephardim, the Sephardic Jews, the day before Columbus set sail. Now, Columbus was trying to get King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to finance his voyage for about 7 years. So we'll go through and look at what Columbus was looking for, how all this happened. And one of the things that we have to understand is Columbus never came to the land that we call the United States of America. The closest he came here was Cuba, which is 90 miles away. At history.com, the official website of the History Channel, when you go research Christopher Columbus, they show you where he went. He never came to the land that we call the United States of America. Okay. And we know that the Spanish are the second ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade. The first ones were the Portuguese, beginning in 1441 with Anton Gonzalez going into what is modern day Mauritania. But we're going to see the transatlantic slave trade slowly expand. But one of the things that causes it to explode is Columbus and his 4 voyages and going into places like Hispaniola or Santo Domingo. And on Santo Domingo, you have the Dominican Republic and you have Haiti. And we know in 1697, the French are going to take the western third of Hispaniola or Santo Domingo, and they're going to call that Saint Dominique. And in 1791, there's a revolution in the Saint Dominique colony, which becomes known as the Haitian Revolution. That's where Haiti is today. All this land is conquered on behalf of Spain by Christopher Columbus. August 3rd, 1492, Columbus set sail on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. He goes into what we call today the Bahamas. He called it San Salvador, which means Saint Savior, but then he became a devil to the people. He goes into Cuba. He goes into Hispaniola. Cuba did not get its independence from Spain until 1898 during the Spanish-American War. Okay? That's about 400 years after Columbus conquers Cuba. He goes into the West Indies. He goes into Boricuan, what we call Puerto Rico. He goes into Jamaica. Okay, so a lot of these places that people like to go on vacation, right? A lot of these Caribbean islands and tropical islands that like to go on vacation were raped by Columbus and his men on behalf of Spain. Jamaica was one of them. Puerto Rico was one of them. He goes into Trinidad. He goes into Venezuelan mainland, South America. He goes into Panama and Honduras, right? So when we see things taking place in this world today, like with Haiti, in the conflict in Haiti, we can trace that right back to these colonizers. This is why understanding history is so important, because your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. And unfortunately, many Americans don't understand either one. Okay, so we'll look at the influence of Columbus, and then Columbus and his 4 voyages are going to lead to King Charles V and the Asiento de Negros. Okay, King Charles V and the Asiento de Negros, August of 1518. And this drastically expands the transatlantic slave trade. And it causes the first direct routes from Africa to their final destinations and not having to stop in Europe, not having to stop in Spain. Okay, we'll look at things like the doctrine of discovery, Dum Diversas, 1452, and Pope Nicholas V, etc. So this is a deep history. So we go through and look at this history chronologically as much as we can. Okay, so register for this class: Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We're going to do it a lot of history you've never heard before. People like Bartolomé de las Casas. You can't talk about the transatlantic slave trade without talking about Bartolomé de las Casas, Christopher Columbus, King Charles V of Spain, because de las Casas is the one who advocates for Africans, primarily, secondarily, some white people to be enslaved as opposed to Native Americans. He's the one that proposes this, and he traveled on some of the voyages with Christopher Columbus. Right Reverend Bishop Bartolomé de las Casas. Now, de las Casas is going to quickly regret that and fight against the transatlantic slave trade, but it's too late. This thing has exploded. Okay, 1518 is before the English get involved in 1562 with Sir John Hawkins. All these European nations did not get involved in the transatlantic slave trade at the same time. This thing slowly evolves. Okay, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Register for these 2 online courses. And like I said, we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. You don't have to be live in the class. You can see me in the class. I can't see you. Click right here, register here, and it takes you to our next page. Click right here to enroll. All right. And then also register for the second class that I teach coming up June 23rd. Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Okay, because these 2 classes are going to blow you away. You can use this content with your children. Like I said, the content is PG-13. I don't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. The class is very visual, okay, and you're going to learn so much in this. And that second class that I teach, like I said, directly relates to what's taking place right now with politics. Your understanding of history, your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. So when we get into this class, and one of the things that we deal with is the party realignment between the Democrats and Republicans that began in 1928 with what's called the Lily White Movement of 1928, which was the effort of Republicans to push African Americans out of the Republican Party and ignore our needs and concerns. That began with the Republicans wanting to get Herbert Hoover elected as president in 1928. So they appealed to Southern segregationist Democrats in 5 former Confederate states. And African Americans started slowly going over to the Democratic Party, because even though we were leery of them, we saw them being more receptive to our issues. Then in 1947, 1948, when Harry Truman was running for president, the Democratic Party had a more pro-civil rights agenda, which caused backlash with the Southern segregationist Democrats known as Dixiecrats, and Strom Thurmond is going to run for president as the Dixiecrat candidate. Strom Thurmond loses, Harry Truman wins, but Strom Thurmond eventually is going to leave the Democratic Party, leave the Dixiecrats, and where does he go? He goes to the Republican Party, where he is until he dies. And you're going to have a lot of those Southern segregationist Democrats who leave the Democratic Party and go to the Republican Party, and the party realignment ends with the election of Richard Nixon in 1968, who ran as a backlash to the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the rebellions that were taking place in this country, who ran as a backlash to the social services programs, the Great Society programs from the Lyndon Baines Johnson. He ran as a backlash to all of that, and he ran on white grievance, and he ran on a platform of law and order. And law and order, when you hear people talk about this like Donald Trump, law and order, who was friends with Richard Nixon, that means protect white people and lock up African Americans. When you hear that, okay? And then June 17th, 1971, what does Richard Nixon do? He declares the war on drugs. That's where the war on drugs begins. I did an extensive presentation, a 2-hour lecture dealing with the history of the war on drugs and the origins of it. That goes back to June 17th, 1971, where Richard Nixon, after he wins the election in 1968, after he lost the presidential election in 1960, to John F. Kennedy, and Nixon ran on this backlash. Ronald Reagan, 1980, wins on a backlash against African Americans. This is a deep history. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. So when you see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and I've been on Roland's show almost every week since October 2020, almost 4 years. The reason why I can talk about politics is because I understand history. So you see me providing historical and political analysis because I understand both of them. I teach this history. All right, we got to get out of here. I have to teach this class. You can also support the African History Network, $, the AHN show, $, the AHN show through Cash App, $, the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. This is our official Cash App account. Now, there's some fake ones out there I'm still trying to get shut down. That's why I created this graphic, because they've been stealing money from us. And if you see some of these fake ones, please report these bastards to, please. They've been stealing money from us, okay? And it hurts us financially. There's about 5 fake African History Network Cash App accounts out there that I've identified. Ours is $, the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael. Usually it'll show my picture there, but you click on this link right here. This takes you to a QR code. This is our Cash App account. All right. These other ones out here are fake. They've been stealing money from us. They may be white supremacists, or they may be black social media disinformation agents that hate black people also, because you got some of those fake ass people out here as well. And this is our link for PayPal also, paypal.me/the AHN show. All right. You can join me in class, register for this class at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I got to jump off here. I got to teach this class now. Remember, right now is correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we